Buenos dias.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me well?
I can. How are you?
Good. We are live on YouTube. Just to let
Excellent.
you
I shouldn't say anything rude.
know. We shouldn't reveal our secrets.
No.
Uh,
How are you? You well?
I'm well. Good to see you.
How are all our listeners?
Well, we had
Can
two
we?
people in the waiting room. Now we have only one, but people are coming.
Excellent. Can you see if we have people watching on YouTube
I can have a look.
or Facebook as well?
It says there's one person on YouTube right now.
Excellent. Hello. There we go.
So I'll just bring people in and I'll remove the waiting room.
Hello, Caroline. Caroline. Wendy and Tasty Space Tea.
Is Tasty Space Tea as in Bomber, or is that a real person?
No, I'm presuming that's there's a real person.
That's a real person.
Oh, it looks like Naomi. No, I can't. It's a bit dark. Who else have we got? Grace Ho. Well, it's all yours, Fernando.
You're supposed to introduce me as if nobody knew me.
Well, everybody knows you. Okay, so you want me to introduce you?
Yeah, please. That's nice.
Okay, so the best. How do I introduce you? Apart from how I got introduced to Fernando was he sent me an email when he first came to Australia and said, "Oh, I'm in Australia. I've done some TRE. I'd like to connect. I'd like to connect." He said was the now that I know his accent. And even in this is probably what's interesting for me is even in him writing something in his email before I even spoke to him, I just felt this sense inside me of going, I already kind of like this person, or I want to connect with them. Like I was just like, I want to reach out. That was it. Nothing that I could understand. Wasn't because of anything he'd written. There was just, I know that in me there was some resonance, and then I was very fortunate to meet Fernando and then have him in Australia for a couple of years, and then go on our journey of expanding some of the traditional TRE models and just bringing other things and all Fernando's knowledge and wisdom that he'll talk about today, and bringing that into the tremoring space. Those of you who've done a Tremor Revolution workshop, but the essence for me was that it wasn't about what he'd written, but it was about just something in what he was bringing forwards. G'day, Christine. And something that he was bringing forwards that I felt a resonance to, and a sense of life and joy and vitality. And I think that's, as I say, I was reflecting on just being for a walk with my partner and our dogs, and was reflecting upon that. It's like, what is the key things that Fernando has brought to me in my life? And it's been a sense of vitality. It's probably the best word for it, or joy and vitality, and a lot of depth. So I suppose that's the thing for me, is in reflecting upon, and I'm pretty sure I put this in the introduction into the foreword that I wrote for the book, is that what Fernando's bringing is not really the words or the theories or the they're all there pointing towards something else that's inside us. You can't write. You can write about life force or the flow of life, but that's not what it is. That's not where it is. And so for me, that's the essence of what this book is connecting us into, in whatever way that we resonate with it or each relate to it. And so for me, in my experience, it's less about going, oh, how's the theory of this, and what's the the grammar or the quality of the writing, or it's not about, that's not the focus, but it's like sitting around a fire in a circle and the fire's in the middle, and we're all sitting around, and so we've all got lenses and ways of looking. But what Fernando's calling us to, in my experience, and through this book, is not about the book itself. It's about what the book's pointing to. So it's a doorway or an avenue for us to connect in. So that's probably, I don't know if that introduces you much. You've got everyone knows you. So, and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day what your bio or your background or your qualifications are, even though you are highly qualified. I think the greatest qualification, in my opinion, with Fernando is that he is a student of life and lived experience and personal exploration. So it's not coming out of, what he's writing about is not coming out of a theory or just an intellect. It's about trying to translate experiences that he's had that we all relate to and we all connect to, and to then create a framework for that so that we can all have the experience. The aim of, if I don't want to overspeak for Fernando, but the aim of Fernando's book is not that we all just read the book and go, oh, that was an interesting book, I enjoyed reading the book. It's about the step or the doorway where that's going to lead us to, which is having the experience in our body. That's probably not the traditional introduction, but that's good enough for me, Fernando. How's that for you?
That sounds good. You can keep going. I'm enjoying it.
Good. I'm good. Anyway, so introducing my dear friend and brother from another mother in another country, in another culture, Fernando Aguiar.
Thank you. Thank you, Richmond.
Sorry, introducing my friend, my colleague, psychologist, psychotherapist, and author. Because doesn't it make a difference when we have a book? My brother recently was talking to me saying in America, it's like you've either got to be a professor or have a book. They're kind of like the same thing. It gives you a certain level of kudos. So my hope is that the book also helps open doors, not so much for you, but so other people can get access to you, Fernando, and what you're sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I really, really enjoy what you said, because that's it about the book. It's not necessarily the theory that's in it, but the words are just my effort trying to translate something that's very hard to put in words. And I want, before I start telling how I got to the book, I want to thank everybody who supported the translation. That was really important because Brazilian currency is not strongest, and the translation was in US dollars, so it was really good to have people supporting that. And it felt really good, the sense of that the book is a result of a collective movement. Although I wrote it, but even I had written it, I really have the sense that was life flowing through me. So I know calling myself the author, sometimes I feel a bit fake, because life was riding through, and also having people support it feels really good. I enjoy having people's name in the book, and knowing that they will be there. If the book's still there in 100 years, the names will be there. And I like that sense of collective. And I want to thank Richmond a lot, not only for this introduction, for being here with me today, for writing the forewords, but also for all the time we spent together, and all his questionings and all his provocations and everything we have explored, and all his ideas and all the books he read and shared with me, and everything he would be in touch with, he would share with me, and that would provoke me in certain ways. And was actually Richmond who first opened my mind for what the tremors could be. When, I don't know, he probably have shared that with some of you, when he did his Vipassana and his body was going spontaneous movements. He didn't know anything about theory at the time. So that, for the first time, was like, oh, really? That's, so that was the first time I heard of something like that. And that says everything, from that, everything we've experienced together. I used to joke that Richmond, he's in the ink in the book, in the printing, he's like everywhere. Everywhere you read it, there's a bit of Richmond in it.
All right, great. Now let me jump in, Fernando. So we know how great we each are. We know how brilliant we are, you and I. We could talk about how brilliant we are for the rest of the thing, but this is a book launch, and we've got other people who need to know not how brilliant we are, but how brilliant they are, and linking them into, again, whatever this flow of life. So let's. So
but that's to give a context how this book comes to be. And also I have to say something. So I have a little baby. She's almost 1 year old, and she's sleeping. And my wife is a doula, and the planets have aligned, and she has a woman that's about to pop. So she might have to leave. And if the baby cries, I might have to attend to the baby and come back and with the baby. So let's see how this goes.
Dare I say, you may need to surrender to the flow of life.
Yes, exactly. So this book is the joining of two paths that are very important in my life. One path is core energetics, which is a body psychotherapy approach I'm trained at. And the other path is TRE, or that starts with TRE, but the spontaneous movements, but definitely TRE. So this book is the coming together of both. And the way it happened, so surrendering to the flow has a lot to do with TRE and with the spontaneous movements and everything that brought to me, those things that brought to me, yes. And the subtitle, Beyond Character Defense Structures, that has a lot to do with core energetics. And I was kind of, exploring those two paths at the same time. And one night, they spontaneously came together, and I just saw it, and I thought, oh my God, it's the same thing. So that's how the book came to be. I started exploring this since I met Richmond, and we would do things together, but I also explore things on my own. And I learned inner dance, which is a kind of a spontaneous movement practice with music. And with all those explorations, at some point, and I would every day I would lie down and allow my body to start moving, and then I'll be there for whatever, an hour. It was not like TRE that I'm shaking with my legs up. I'll just, so my body would move, stop, and move again, and things would happen. It was not like continuous movement. There was its own flow. And I don't know, after a while, I noticed that some states of consciousness, some states of being would often repeat themselves. And of course, I only noticed that after a few times practicing it, because I said, oh, I've experienced something similar to this before. And then I would notice that it would come back at some point again. And that got me curious. So, what are those states of being that tend to repeat themselves? Those flavors that come back again. And at the same time, I have this practice I usually do before I see a client in the office. I think I learned it from Barbara Brennan's Hands of Light book. And it's an alignment practice. I just do my own short version of it. So it's a practice that I'm standing, grounding myself, and then I move one hand to connect with the ground, with the earth, and then another hand to connect with the heavens. And then I bring those energy back together in my chest. And then every time I would do that, my body would shake. So as I was moving my hands upward and downward together, my body would start shaking. And then when I reached here, it would calm down. And then later on, I find out that actually also it was not just one single shake. The shake had different flavors as I was moving my hands. So all this was very experiential, and I made an effort not to rationalize it, not to try to understand it, to analyze it too soon, because I didn't want my mind interfering with it so much. And that's something I learned with TRE. Just let's see what the body is teaching us. And I think it was I started those explorations more consciously, maybe 2016 or 2015, and probably 15, yes. And then only 2020, 2019, I started writing it, because that's when I felt, okay, it's time to start writing. I had presented it in a convention, in a core energetics convention, and I felt, oh, there's a bit more organized. It's a bit more organized. I can start writing about it. And there's something special about this work when I said that life was writing it through me, because that's how I feel also when I'm working with it. I feel that it's about waking up this vital force, this life energy within us, and allowing it to move us in whichever way it wants to move us. And in Portuguese, life is a feminine noun, so I always refer to it as a she. So it's like a she energy, a feminine, energy that I feel that it's present, and it takes me to a dance. It invites me to a dance, and I go dancing with her, and it's very enjoyable and pleasurable. And every time I experience that, every time, especially when I'm with a group, I feel that life is teaching me a little bit more about this. So I know by the time I finished writing the book, I already wanted to update it. Because that's I knew I was writing something that was, it's a doorway, like Richmond said, but there's so much more. It's like, oh, I just start teaching you and you're already writing a book. No, you haven't learned anything yet. Wait for another 10 years and we'll see what. So it's like, there's so much that life reveals to us when we allow to be taught by it. And I think that's the main teaching of this book. There's so much life available to us. Yeah, let me take a sip of water.
Do you want some leading questions? Or hey, you're kind of running the show and I'm pretending to run it.
Yeah, please. Do you have anything in mind that you think would be useful for the TRE community?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So, the subtitle is about beyond character defense structures. So one of the things I see in what you're bringing, Fernando, is that the lens that you're bringing to the spontaneous movement is a developmental model. And traditionally TRE, for those people coming from TRE, is not a developmental model, it's a trauma model. They're not mutually exclusive in any way, and there's a lot of crossover, but there's a really significant difference, or just another layer, another perspective of the fire. So if I'm trying to paraphrase, so if I can just try and sort of summarize for me, my understanding, so coming through that lens, and then you can clarify. So the character defenses were originally kind of developed by William Reich. Was he the first? He was the first kind of person to start speaking about character defenses, and this idea that once we're born, or even in utero, that we have these developmental milestones, primarily in relationship to others. So that's probably the key thing. It's around about the healthy development of our human relationships, and that at different points, if those sort of normal, quote normal, or the needs of the organism are not met in the way that it would like to have them met, or seems to need to have them met, then our body or our organism, because it's not a conscious process, will start to develop certain patterns of behavior, but also physiology. So they become a certain pattern in our physical structure and also in the way that we move. And depending on, different stages of our development, when we have those kind of fractures or those inadequacies, which is part of life. Like, now we're a parent. Thankfully, you're now a parent. We're all doing our best. We're all, the idea that we have an ideal parent is not real, and it's not even meant to be real. We're meant to, like, one of the great things of TRE and David Berceli is the sense that we're designed to evolve through trauma. So the idea is not about having a perfect childhood, because then we would miss out on other elements. But this sense that at different stages of our development, we create these physical structures and behavioral responses and movement patterns that are so deeply buried in the foundation or the scaffolding of who we are, that they then start to play out and have an impact in our later life. So we'll come, and then the other element is that there's also our innate organism, or our life force, or life in general, then also wants to bring almost the opposite of that, to bring healing and resolution and growth through that, which is, allowing and surrendering to that process. So we'll probably come onto that later, but can you just briefly talk then about, what character structures means to you, and even like, because you have covered them in the book, so the different adaptive styles, you've talked about a few, but can you just expand a little bit more, a little bit about what they are, but how they're relevant to people in their lives? How does that translate what we know about those patterns? Why is it relevant to people sitting here now, listening to this, doing TRE? What's the relevance? What's in it for them to understand this, or to have this model?
Yes, that's good. So when I first learned about the character defense structures, I had a bit of a with them, because I thought, more labels. So I'm labeling people as this or that character structure, and didn't like that. But I also had to admit that they are very precise. In core energetics, we learn body reading. So you learn how to read the person's body and how that body adapts, and what character structures are playing out in that body. And it's very precise. And I would get unsettled with that. I don't like the labeling, but I really acknowledge the effectiveness of the model. And maybe that's a consequence of the traditional medical model. The way I got it was like separate boxes, separate categories. And the first time that started to change was when I read Lawrence Haller's book, Healing Developmental Trauma. Because then when I read it, I don't even know if he talks about that, but I got that sense of a continuum. Instead of being, separated things, it's a continuum from conception till the end of first childhood, around 7 years old. It's a continuum. It's not like, 6 months. No, it's not like that. It's the time. Where the time definitions are just like a guideline. They're just a guideline. They're not like, so at 6 months old. And that's very clear with my daughter. So they say that the first developmental wound can happen from conception till 3-6 months old. But it was very clear that at 1 month and a half, she started to change from that, newborn kind of, spaced out state into a more present baby. And I thought, I thought this was going to happen at 3 months old. No, but so it's a continuum. It's not like, it's at 2 years old we become a toddler, and then another stage of development is in place. That's a continuum. So as Richmond said, those developmental traumas or adaptive styles or character defense. I really like the adaptive styles because it gives that sense of adaptation that, you know, it brings about our organism's intelligence to deal with life. And also, I'm here in a situation, the situation is a bit rough, I need to adapt. And my organism will do its best to adapt to the situation. Instead of, oh, I need to defend myself and I'm just gonna shut down and defend myself. That's such a different, it's the same thing in a way, but it's totally different because in one way we are focusing on the body's intelligence, the organism's intelligence, which is filled with millions of years of wisdom, you know, of life. So we all have our adaptive styles, we all being a newborn, a child, and we all face our challenges, you know, as we were growing up, because it doesn't need to be anything rough. It's a mix between the person's, the child's personality and the environment. You know, so a very sensitive child doesn't need much to get impacted. Or maybe a more rough child, you know, won't care about that situation and go through it in a much better way than a more sensitive child. So it's not only about the external situation, it's a dance between the internal reality and the external situation. And it's about our adaptations. And they are very relevant because pretty much everything we do in life are based on those adaptations, and how we relate, how we see life, how we, you know, the beliefs we have about life and how life is or isn't, the way we relate to our bodies, pretty much everything in the way we behave has to do with those adaptations. And you said something that's, for me, it's key. I know the developmental model and the trauma model. And yes, for me, this work is a developmental model, not only for childhood, but also mostly for our adulthood. So as adults, how we continue developing as a person, you know, because there is this idea that's changing, but still very strong, that once you grow up, that's it. You get skills, you train yourself in this or that, but you stop developing, which is nonsense. And for me, Richmond, one key thing to go from the trauma model to the developmental model is this identification. So I have received some influences when I was, you know, building this work. Not that I was looking for influences, but they were just happening as life happens. And one major influence I had was from Tibetan Buddhism in the concept of emptiness. And not that I know, it's a pretty complex thing, but one aspect of it that was really important is this idea that so everything is a concept. I am a concept. You know, I am a bunch of concepts of who I am, what I like, what I don't like. You know, I'm Brazilian, I'm a man, I'm a white male, heterosexual. You know, that's all a lot of concepts, and that tells me who I am. But that's not true. That's just a bunch of concepts. Who I am is something beyond that. It's like what Richmond was talking about, you know, the book. It's a lot of words, but what I'm talking about is beyond words. And it's the same with us. We are beyond words. We try to, you know, we have names to make it easier. Instead of calling, hey, bunch of words over there, can you come away? That will make it much harder. So we develop a lot of words to make our communication easier. But then we get attached to the words as if they were real things, you know, as they were, you know, and also with our emotions. So with our sadness or anger or disgust or fear or, pleasure or joy. All these words are concepts. The actual experience might be slightly different between all of us. And with the concept comes judgments. So, joy is great, but sadness not. Anger is good, but fear is not. And each person will have their set of judgments around those concepts. And for me, it was very important to step away from the concepts. Hi, Lucia. And start looking especially at the emotions, because they would come often in those experimentations I was doing. And I realized that allowing them to happen was a key aspect to not stop the flow. And to allow them to happen, disidentifying from them would be very important. So fear would come, and instead of, oh my God, I'm going to be afraid. I said, well, this is happening. We usually call it fear, but it's not. It's just something happening. It's just something moving in my organism that in English we call fear. In Portuguese we call medo. Very different. Two words for the same thing. If I say medo, nobody knows what I'm talking about. But and speaking two languages, that makes that even stronger. I often ask Richmond questions that he laughs and said, "Oh, only 5 years old ask those questions." But that's another topic. So disidentifying from concepts and disidentifying from the ideas we have about them changes completely, because then it's not like, oh my God, I'll be re-traumatized. Oh my God, we have to quiet down. We have to self-regulate. It's like, no, life is flowing. Trust it. It knows way better. We are 50, 60, 70 years old, 37. Life is what? Millions. So who am I? So those states of mind and consciousness that would repeat often in my practice, I'll shortcut here to say that at some point it became really clear that they were the same. They were particular intelligences, and I called them in the book structuring intelligences, because it became clear to me that during development, what's happening from conception till 7 years old, but continuing throughout life, is the embodiment of those intelligences. So those stages of development, they are actually moments where, for the first time as a being incarnated, I'm embodying those intelligences. I'm learning how to function in this body, in this organism, in this world. And those intelligences are designed to support me in that. And it's the disruption of that intelligence that creates the character defense structures, the adaptive styles. It's actually the use of that intelligence to deal with the challenges that's the adaptation, that's the adaptive style. So just to give an example, the first intelligence is about arriving in this body.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
Can I jump in,
Yes,
Fernando?
yes.
Can I just reflect a few things before then we move on, because I want you to move on to picking one. So just to kind of cross over, in a way, what I feel like I want to do is put a rope on the helium balloon and pull you back down and go, right, let's get this really grounded and what this means in this practical reality body. And so one of the things that I hear that I want to reflect upon is TRE has traditionally had such a strong emphasis on self-regulation and a kind of pathologization of altered states or bigger states or hyper-emotional states. And what I hear you pointing towards really clearly is this sense of there's wisdom in those, rather than going, we need to choose what we prefer and what we don't prefer, and we need to create life. And so it's that ego sense of preference. rather than surrendering to the experience in the moment. You know, rather than going, yeah, I want to do some tremoring so I get this. I feel more calm. I want to get rid of my anger so I'm in. It's actually surrendering to the full experience. So, you know, in a TRE model, for me, it's about moving beyond self-regulation to what I've started calling auto-regulation, which is the idea of, instead of going, I cognitively, with my choice and my ego, are choosing what I want to experience and saying yes to this and no to that, and being vigilant, because I have to make sure that that I regulate my experience during TRE and I regulate my experience in life, is literally more surrendering to whatever the experience is in the moment. Is that an accurate translation into the TRE for you?
Yes, and that's something you bring to me a lot, and that's something we have experienced in our workshops. People saying how much they would let go, how much they would feel sometimes so crazy but so centered.
And I have to reflects me. We last did a workshop in Sydney, a tremoring revolution workshop. If you haven't seen them, so you know, it's kind of like just this shaking retreat. And at the end of that, we were doing a process we're calling neurogenic resonance, just for want of a better word, where we would sit with each other, and many of you have experienced that, and allowing the body to respond neurogenically or autogenically, or whatever we want to call it. So spontaneously respond to each other's spontaneous movements. And I just remember it happened, you know, it goes to this place where everyone will start to be laughing and everything goes crazy. And I remember in our last workshop in Sydney, where if you walk past that room, you would just go, this is the most craziest, over the top, people completely kind of seemingly out of control or something. I can't remember, there was the exact words you said, but it was also the most grounded, real, embodied experience ever. On the outside, it looked like everyone was laughing and flapping around and going, you know, TRE on steroids plus on ayahuasca. It's kind of like, it was just, the room was going off. And yet in amongst that, there was something 100 times more profoundly centered and organizing and embodied that was running it inside. You remember that? Do you remember exactly what you said then that day?
I might have said that's the psychiatric ward.
Looked like a psychiatric ward, but you also said it looked like a psychiatric ward, but it was the most grounded and embodied group that we'd ever been in.
Yeah.
It was like on the outside, it looked like that, but there was something clearer and deeper.
And I remember being really struck by one person who said that she actually had experience with, I don't know if it was psychotic breakdowns. And she was a bit concerned about doing the practice because she was afraid of falling back in that hole. And she said, it felt exactly the same, but I was so present. And it was so kind of relieving, transforming to go there and come back and be, you know, having that autonomy, having that freedom. And that was really powerful to hear.
Yeah. So again, to try and translate this a little bit, the whole, you know, in TRE traditionally, and with me as well, because I taught it how I was at the time, in a way, there's often a sense around following the ego. Not saying this is what David Berceli's been saying us to all, but as we all pick it up and in our limitations at the time. And even that sense, you know, self-regulation, it's about me as an individual, me as an ego, choosing and regulating and keeping an eye out and sort of keeping the reins and keeping in control. Not wrong or bad, and it's a wonderful step on the journey coming out of complete lack of control. But what you're pointing to and what we've been doing in the Tremor Revolution is about moving beyond that individuated. This is about me directing the process and me choosing, even filtering what I want and what I don't want, and dropping into a deeper layer of surrender. And that moves you on to what you're calling the structural intelligences, is rather than going, oh, those things were bad and they're wrong and they shouldn't have happened as a child and I've got to heal them, I've got to fix them and I've got to get rid of them, is actually embracing them and engaging them and going, there's this intelligence which is within them, rather than picking and choosing. So there's this, your book's not called, surrender to the flow of your own life, or, surrender to the flow of your ego's life, or surrender to the flow of your preferential life. It's about surrendering to all of life and all of that sort of thing. So what I'd love to do, and I think it'd be really helpful, is if you can use the trust adaptive style to explain to people, sort of go, right, so this is, so that people are getting a really grounded thing of, okay, this is kind of what the trust adaptive style is. This is how it plays out. This is how it plays out in later life, and how we look at it. And then from that, once you kind of given that framework, so it's a very grounded, practical, what does this look like in an adult, me now? And you're welcome to use me if that's useful, but, giving people that. And then from that, then we can springboard off into saying, right, well, what's structural intelligence is, because that's what we're moving beyond that pathological model into the energy behind it and the organizing principles. So if that is okay with you, can you do us that? Can you talk, what is the trust adaptive style? Just give us a brief thing about what it is, what it looks like, how we would experience now in our adult life, that pattern.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll do that. And then at some point later, I want to take everyone through a journey of each intelligence, because I'm sure, as you practice, whatever you practice, you will touch those intelligences. And what I find useful about knowing about them is that the sense of familiarity grows. So before, they were just like all mashed up in one thing for me. I didn't know they existed. I didn't know they were different things, although the same, but different expressions of the same thing. And with time, as they become more clear, they became like a song I know really well. So when the song starts playing, then I already know which song it is, and I can just go with it, instead of just being, oh no, I think I heard that before, not quite sure. So they become more available, and you can go deeper into them as they show up. And I also want to say, Rich, that with the stronger emphasis on self-regulation, one of the risks I find is that you stop the flow, and you use the tremoring to not go into flow. You just keep them constricted, because sometimes going to flow means going to profound crying. And I'll get to the trust style. And one thing I talk in my book is about the 16-second wave of emotion. And I found out that if I surrender myself completely to an emotional experience, it won't last much. It often lasts 16 seconds. There might be another wave, but it won't be like a continuous wave for like 3 minutes of deep crying or total panic and terror, or full-on rage. No, it will be a 16-second rage, and it will be gone, and something else will be happening. But the more we try to hold it, then the more it expands, because it's like, it needs more space. It feeds itself over and over. It doesn't get the resolution that it needs. Okay, so having said that, so the trust adaptive style has to do with around 3 years old. That's the stage of development when the child starts to become a bit more defined, self-affirming. That's usually when they would say, "I hate you," and walk away, kind of thing. 3, 4 years old. And what the usual books say that will create the wound is that when parents take advantage of that little boy, little girl, in terms of, oh, it's already a bit, no, I can take she or he as my partner. but then creates a push and pull in the relationship. When I'm in need of you, I bring you closer. But when I'm busy, I say, oh, come on, you too clingy, you too needy, you just go play by yourself. But when I'm needy, I say, oh, come on, my special girl, my special boy, come here. Come with daddy, come with mom. Let's go for a walk, just the two of us. So it creates that special kind of relationship. But it's like sometimes you're special, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're annoying. And it's based on my needs, not the child's needs. So the child needs the bond with the parent. They will do anything for the bond with the parent. And in that case, they will relinquish, they will give up that development of that identity to become, I need to find out what makes me special. No, because sometimes I'm special, sometimes I'm not. That's probably because I did something. So I need to find what I'm special, what's special about me. Maybe it's my grades at school. Maybe it's the sport. Maybe, I don't know, the child would find their ways to be special. And they will grow up, in that, feeling special in one way, but feeling shit in another. So as an adult, people will often describe those alternations. Sometimes they're feeling awesome and they are, amazing, but sometimes they're just nothing. So it's that I'm everything or I'm nothing kind of, extremes. And there is always a belief, there's usually a belief that I can't trust anyone. I can't trust life. Everybody's trying to take advantage of me. Everybody's trying to manipulate me. So I have to be on the lookout. I have to be alert. I have to read the room all the time. I have to read people all the time. Of course, there are great skills that comes with that, but also great imprisonment. What else I could say? I think that's enough about the trust. Yeah.
So in a way, what you're kind of alluding to, again, if I can summarize just to kind of translate it into my language at least, it's that sense of a lot of our neurotic behaviors as adults, where is actually underpinned by these patterns of learnt behavior as a child. We're talking about, in the TRE model, we're talking about developmental trauma. Yes. That we all carry, not sort of capital T developmental trauma of abuse, and that, that's something deeper in that, but that we all carry these developmental patterns that feed into these experiences as young people. Can you then give us a bit of and again, this is a generalization, but just bringing it back to, so that's the behavioral element, but bringing it back to the physical body structure. So this is where the character, the defense structures kind of came from. Can you explain a little bit about how that may show up as adults in our physical body patterns, like the shape of our body and also our movement patterns, in response to life?
Yes. Okay. So it usually shows up differently in men and women. It could be that there is a tendency. So in men, there is a tendency to show up as broad shoulders and tiny thin legs. So because the energy comes up here, I have to be big and strong. And I usually have very strong piercing eyes. And I'll have an attitude that I want to body everybody. Hey, buddy, are you all right? I want to make everybody smaller than me so I can feel safe. It's usually, if you go to a lecture and you get out of the lecture feeling you're completely dumb, that's probably because you're hearing a person like that. Because they talk in a way that makes you feel dumb. Like, oh my God, there's so much I should know, but I don't. This person's so intelligent.
And again, so to bring that from the behavioral, so that's still the behavioral element, which is absolutely relevant. Okay. But on a physical level, as you're saying, for that male, there's often a sense of lifting, but like a bird puffing its feathers. So there's a lot of energy invested in trying to hold a bigger structure. So like being tense and holding the muscular structure so it's almost ready to. It's like flexing almost. So on a physical, again, these are only generalizations. They're not saying, oh, everyone's like that. But again, is that sort of the physical structure? And then, so for example, again, I'm wanting to bring that back to expand it from the behavioral level to go, well, oh, this might mean that, gee, I've got chronic tension in my shoulders from trying to puff my shoulders out, or I can't relax and let go, because to do that would be to go into a soft, vulnerable chest. So instead I've got an overinflated, tight chest all the time, and I don't have a full breath. Is
that's it? So there's usually, in the men, there's usually pain in the lower back because of all that stiffness. There's a total lack of trust in the legs. So it's like if the floor was in the shoulders, so just a lot of tension, a lot of emphasis in the shoulders. And if the shoulders, if you release the shoulders through touch, massage, and they're standing, they often feel that they're going to fall down because the legs cannot bear the weight, even though they might have stronger legs. In women, it tends to be the opposite. And women tend to have large waist, hips, and smaller upper body. And that's because that's where the power is. So usually, when in that structure, it usually goes a lot to women who use seduction as a way of having power. Men can be also very seductive, but it can be also very authoritarian with that structure. But it's always related to the chest. There's low energy in the heart, in the chest. There's a lot of protection in the chest. Is that what you?
Yeah, beautiful. So you're describing there's those physical structures and there's the behavioral impacts. So, and this is where what I see in your book, you're pointing towards. Because at this stage, we're kind of going, here's the pathology. Like I even feel talking about this, there's that sense of, oh my God, I'm so broken. I'm so wounded. I've got that. I've got all these problems. I've got all these pathologies and which are all true. They're all real and valid. Those patterns are there. But this brings us to, and again, before you go in and work your way through the structures, if we can stay with this trust one, now what you're bringing forwards is this concept that, I certainly haven't read anywhere or seen everywhere, which is what you're describing as structural intelligences. So rather than going, oh, right, well, we're broken, we're pathologic, now how do we fix that and how do we heal that? You're talking about something else, which is this structural intelligences. So can you kind of frame that through this trust adaptive style, which then I can't remember whether that's the fourth intelligence. I can't remember which one. And I know they're not exactly aligned, but can you translate then, take us from, because that's where we're all at in the kind of, in a TRE developmental world, that's the model. And you go, right, no, there's this next step, which is really what you're calling forwards, beyond that pathology, now treat it.
Yeah. So my view of it is that when we are around 3-4 years old, we are when we are around 2, we are starting to embody the intelligence of power. So we start to learn about our power as a person. First, our power to take space. We start to realize more and more that we have a power to interfere in the space around us as a toddler. We are walking around, we are moving things, that becomes, and we are getting a sense of self, of I. And I'm exploring more and more autonomy as a toddler, and as that goes, then gets to that point of embodying more of that strong, assertive energy. When I get angry and I say I hate you and I walk away as a child, I'm starting to learn how to embody that power of who I am. And if I don't have room to explore that power, or if that power gets misused, then I will use that intelligence to try to deal with the challenge. So I'll try to solve everything using my power. So I'll believe that if I am powerful enough, life will be great. But that's not an inner power, because I'm disconnected from my inner power. I'm trying to be powerful out there. I'm trying to be powerful to other people. I want people to see me as powerful. But if I bring that back to me, back to the original intelligence, back to my power of who I am, my power of being this world, my power of interfering in this reality, then I'm realigning myself back to that original intelligence. And that releases me from being powerful outside, but that also gives me power to whenever I need to be powerful outside, real power instead of a puff up power.
The word that stands out for me there, Fernando, and what you're saying is that sense of trying. So, trying to be powerful. And so, yeah, this is what I'm hearing is, and when we have that lack of power or that lack of experience developmentally, then we sort of, our ego, for want of a better word, but we're trying to make it happen because it's not naturally occurring, which brings me back to, rather than pathologizing all the developmental stages, is there's an innate intelligence in each of those phases. And it brings me back to the word that, I sort of joked about in my introduction for you, is connection, and connecting to these powers. So we don't actually have to create it. We don't have to make it, in our Western sort of thing. It's all up to me. I have to create the world. I have to believe the world. I have to manifest the world, which is, kind of limited by my own tiny little ego and what I can see of the world and what I think. Well, you're talking about connecting to a deeper power, so we don't have to do it. We become a channel or a conduit or something like that. That's what I'm really, again, that's what I'm hearing, is that when we're working through these stages, these adaptive patterns and the intelligences, it's about connection to, and allowing the, for want of a better word, innate organic energy or intelligence or whatever it is to flow through us, which is part of our normal which is part of our normal development, rather than keeping it limited. So I think that for me, that, we've kind of got across the steps. I wonder if there's anything else you want to say, or ready to jump into the experiential part, so we can, people, we go, that for me goes, we've got a kind of a bit of a theory about what's happening here, and hopefully bridging a little bit between TRE and what we're talking about, which, again, I'll be really clear. This for me is as much TRE as anything. It's just an evolution and an expansion of the model that we often have, or the limitations. And again, I wouldn't say that's what David wouldn't say that. He would be just saying exactly what we're saying. This is what he's been trying to tell everyone forever, but this is just another way of translating it and calling it in. So my sense would be, unless you've got something you want to add in, it's probably a good time to jump into the experiential part of it.
Yeah, and just to say that the experiential is just that I will guide you guys through, you girls. There are more girls here than guys, so you girls, I'll guide you through the intelligences. And because it's something that's already within you, there's nothing I'm creating, there's nothing that I'll just bring images and words that will help you connect with the intelligence, but it's already there. You probably have experienced it in different ways in your life, different experiences you had in different moments. I'll just bring more awareness to it. I want to comment, Richmond. That when we are practicing TRE, or spontaneous movements, it will try all the time to bring us to the expressions of those intelligences, to it will, like, as we know, it will try to make our tensions release. It will try to bring us back to our center, because with the adaptive styles, our center moves outward, because I'm looking for threat. The threat is out there. The danger is out there. So instead of being centered in myself, I'm centered out there. So it becomes, this polarity between me and the world, me against the world, instead of me with the world, flowing with the world. And the more we allow ourselves to be impacted by that healing element, and that's my profound and deep belief, the more we allow ourselves to be in that harmonious state, the less we need to work too much on the trauma thing. William Heike had something. He would say, we have to reach the untouched protoplasma. So he would say that within us, there's a on a physiological, biological level, there's a part of us that has never been affected by anything, any of the traumas, anything, a healthy part of us that's always there. So we have to connect with it, because it has, the blueprint of our, healthy being. So I think those intelligences, they are that blueprint. And so the balloon Richmond, now it's going to become a yellow balloon, and it's going to go very high. We're going to expand a lot. Because those intelligences, they're not limited to human beings. They are in life. Everything in life carry those intelligences. They are like the fundamental blocks of existence. They carry, so the first intelligence, so the names I gave them are the names related to how I felt them in my body. I tried to give them descriptive names that would help me make them very palpable, instead of some name that doesn't say anything. So the first intelligence, I called it vital energy or embodiment. That's a bad word. In Portuguese, we don't have a word, embodiment. Very hard to translate, but in English, that's a perfect word. So the first intelligence is embodiment, but it has to do with every time life sparks. So when I connect with the first intelligence, I feel my pelvic floor, and it starts to buzz, like an engine, a deep engine, like a vibration, deep vibration. And if I stay there, my whole body will start shaking. And as soon as I connect with it, it feels like, a spark, a fire was lit, like a big bang. Or like when a seed sprouts, some life explodes, life wakes up. So every time life is waking up, whether a star is being formed or a seed is sprouting, I think the first intelligence is at play. So that's the first intelligence, and I usually bring the image of a mountain. They're very solid, because that's how I feel when I'm connected with it. Very solid, very firm, not rigid, but firm, and deeply rooted into the earth, with the aliveness of the earth, with the warmth and heat of the earth. Profoundly solid. I feel very embodied, very much in my body. And again, as I talk about it, my pelvic floor is getting warmer and warmer, and I feel more in my legs. And Richmond is finding it funny.
It's Brazil. It's always about the pelvis.
It's always about the pelvis. And so in core energetics, we talk about energy and consciousness. So for me, that's the connection between energy and consciousness. I am in the same space where my consciousness is. Is the opposite of dissociation, where my energy is one thing and my mind is somewhere else. So I'm with the experience that's happening now. As soon as that energy connects and I start feeling that vibration, the next thing that happens is that it starts to flow. You know? So from that solid mountain, it feels that it becomes like a river. And then the parts of my body that becomes more awakened, it's my lower belly and my pelvis, for Richmond's joy. And it feels like flowing, like spiraling, like moving circularly around the space. And it feels very enjoyable. So I call it fluidity and pleasure, because it's fluid and there's a lot of pleasure in it, like a lot of pleasure of being alive. It's like, oh, I'm alive in this body. I feel so good. It's the same pleasure of eating something very delicious, or the pleasure of taking a warm shower after a tiring day, or the pleasure of a nice hug. That kind of sensual skin sensory pleasure, the pleasure you take from being alive, from the experiences of being alive. But I feel that without having to eat anything, without having the need of anyone touching me. It's just how it happens. It feels like life is touching me, life is embracing me, and it's so amazing to be alive. And as it keeps flowing, then I was moving very much within myself and enjoying myself. And then it feels like it spontaneously wants to move outward. And then I start feeling it kind of in my belly, solar plexus area, and my arms feel like my moving outwards. Then it would happen spontaneously. So after many times, I noticed that it would always happen like that, or very similarly, that I would have this impulse to move my arms outwards, and it felt like, oh, I'm getting to know the space around me. I'm moving and getting to know it, and as I get to know it, I also becoming aware that I can change it, with my presence, with my energy, as you want to say. And then at some point, I will bump into something. Maybe I'll bump at a wall. And that's the first time there's something opposing me, in that fluid flow, spontaneous movement. Something opposes me. And that's a joy. Because for the first time, I can feel my power, my strength. So the first intelligence is embodiment. The second is fluidity and pleasure. And the third is power. First, the power to take space, the power to interfere in reality. And then it becomes the power to kind of assert myself, or, like haka power. That kind of, an animal that will let you know very clearly that if you step further, you're dead, even though it might be a duck. But if you've seen people running from ducks on the internet, because it's not about the size of the animal, it's about the energy. It's that energy that says, I'm ready to protect my space. This is my space. I have the power and I know it, although I'm a duck or a chicken or, a magpie. Or I know my power. And because I know my power, you feel it. And you run from me, although I can't kill you. But you're afraid I can't. I can. You're afraid I can. So usually I say that, first energy and consciousness connect, then they flow with pleasure, then they start interfering with reality, and then they set boundaries. Oh, here's my space. And that's the third intelligence. And as it flows to the next intelligence, then we come to the fourth intelligence, and I call it order. Because when I feel it, it feels that everything comes to my center, and feels that everything is organized. There's an order. There's a order to the existence. And I see it, I know, when I look at nature very much. When I see, flowers, how they are perfect. There's a perfection in how they are organized. The order of petals or the leaves or the feathers of a bird. There's an order to all that. It's not random. So in development, I feel that when we come to that intelligence, we actually become human beings. And I have, in the second half of my book, I describe the experience of people in workshops and groups. And I have a guy sharing with me that he felt like he was like an integrated, like a fully developed human being in that state. Because in that state, you have vital energy, you have pleasure, and you have power. It's like the basic tools, and it's yours to decide what to do with them, to go in your life using them the way it pleases you. You can flow between them. You can have them fairly together. So it's like you own it, you have it. What do you want to do with it? And that's when we get to the last defensive structure, because we will continue to the next intelligences, but in the next intelligence, we are going to go beyond the defensive structures. Because until then, those intelligences, they were used to develop the structures as it was needed. But going from the fourth to the fifth intelligence requires a level of choice. It's a matter of choosing how you're going to use those tools you have, how you're going to use your power, how you're going to use your pleasure, how you're going to use your vitality. Are you going to use just for your sake and develop things in this world for your sake? Or you're going to choose to use them to serve life? So there is, moving to the fifth intelligence, there is a sense of acknowledging that you alone as a human being, even though you might have all these energies and all these powers, it's not enough. It's very limited. There's only so much you can do. So in a way, you decide to relinquish that. You decide to give that away to life. It's like saying, life, I'm yours. Do yourself in me. And I call the fifth intelligence sacred beauty, because every time I get in touch with it, I'm taken by this sense of sacred and beauty of a beautiful sacred space over. So it's like, it's very emotional. Often it's very emotional, and there's a sense of seeing something extremely beautiful and sacred. Sometimes some songs will bring me that. Like Agatha brings me that. My daughter brings me that a lot now. Just looking at her often, I will go into that space. But for those who have been the revolutions with me in Richmond, you've been there. Sometimes to go there, you have to get through a sense of grief, a profound crying. That, in my perception, has to do with grieving every time you betrayed life. You made life smaller. You made yourself smaller. Every time you betrayed your deeper wisdom. But as we cry that profoundly and as we grieve that, then this beautiful sacred space opens up. Yeah. But then it continues flowing. And often after this profound experience with sacred beauty, there is an experience of silence. And that's the sixth intelligence, and I call it pure presence. Because then suddenly there is profound silence, quietness, spaciousness. Sacred beauty is very emotional, but pure presence is not emotional at all. It's just quietness. And then, for a while, I just knew those six intelligences. And I thought, well, that's the goal. It's either to be in sacred beauty or pure presence, or alternating between the two of them. Those are the best ones. That's where I want to be all the time. So every time I would do the practice, I'll get there. And then after a while, I was not there anymore. Oh, I can't stay there forever. How can I stay? If I just try a bit harder, I'll be able to stay there forever. But no matter how much I practice, how much profound was the experience, it would end. And, maybe I'm doing something wrong. But then one day, many synchronicities of life, I was presenting this intelligence to someone because I wanted the person's feedback. So I want to show something. Let me know what you think. So I was, moving through the intelligences in my body as we were doing right now, and I was mentioning the intelligences, and I asked the person, just be open to feel, myself, what I'm doing, the space around me. And the person was feeling everything I was describing. And then I stopped at the sixth intelligence because that was all I knew. And then the person said, oh, and then there is she called it angelic. And the moment she said that, I felt a mix of sacred beauty and pure presence. Was a sense of beautiful sacredness, but also quietness. Very hard to put in words. And then she said, and there is the source. And when she said there is the source, I had this beautiful, profound moment where I had the sense that I went home. And I remember, for a while I stood there. I think I held my breath. I think I don't know what happened, but at some point I opened my eyes and I said, I went home. And that's all I could say for a while. I went home. But I also came back. And that's when I had the realization that the goal was not to stay in any of the intelligences, but to keep flowing, Sometimes I would be in the first, in the third, in the second, in the fifth, and they would flow through me whenever they were needed. I don't know, based on whatever intelligence, wisdom life has, they would continuously flow through me. And that's surrendering to the flow of life. It's surrendering to the flow of those intelligences as they show up. So the way that looks like for me, I usually do that standing and with music because it helps me usually I'm dancing, but not dancing, I'm being danced. So I will be standing like still on a grounding stance, breathing, and then I will call, I don't know, the first intelligence. I'll set an intention. It's not calling, it's setting an intention to connect with it. So I want to connect with the first intelligence, and then I'll feel my body starting to shake. And I will be with that shaking. And then from that on, I will let the body take over. So I would start shaking. And if the second intelligence comes, I will start moving my pelvis and flowing into the space. And I will start enjoying the pleasure, in my mouth, in my skin. And I will just have joy and pleasure moving my body. And if the third intelligence comes, the power, it might come as a willingness to, take space around the room, or it might come like as a haka, and I might go like very, wild energy, wanting to express itself, and it's enjoyable. It's not like I'm angry. It's like, it feels good. It's powerful. It's alive. It's my aliveness. And it's my aliveness expressing itself this way. It's like finding the wall to push against, and I can feel how much I can push with all my strength, and I'll feel my strength. It's not that I'm fighting the wall. I actually having its support, so I can feel how much power I have. And then, when the order comes, I usually have a moment of quieting and centering myself. And I might want to move around feeling all the three intelligences interconnected. And then if sacred beauty comes, I will often start crying out loud, or I'll start laughing, or laughing and crying at the same time. And then if silence comes, if pure presence comes, then everything quiets down. And the seventh and the eighth, I call the seventh the union, because that's how I feel it, the union between sacred beauty and pure presence. I touch it very, very subtle, I don't know how to say that, in a very subtle way. So I have very little words to describe it. And the source, I have even less words to describe it. And that's that I feel it's life. There's still a lot for me to learn about those two that I haven't learned yet. It's like I can smell them, but I don't taste them yet. I feel the scent, but I don't feel the taste. And for me, every time I surrender to the flow, one thing that amazes me is that if there is any sign of illness in the body, maybe I'm getting a flu, or maybe I'm having pain in my back or somewhere else, it disappears. It just disappears. It just moves. But it requires a lot of this surrendering too. Whatever crazy expression comes through, without judging it as crazy, just life is moving in non-ordinary ways. Yeah, so that's the flow of intelligences. And the more and more I practice it and I experience that with people, the more I learn about it. Do you have any question, Richmond, or anyone? Maybe we can open for questions. It's already almost time of our planned time. So if anyone has any question, anything to say, I'm happy to hear. Just open your microphone if you can. If you cannot, I'll open it for you. Yeah.
Richmond, I'll take my little hand off. So Christine here. I've been doing open floor dance practice for a while. So my question is related to that, right? Because I could imagine using that practice to do what you're describing. How do you see the relationship between where your body goes in an open floor practice and where it would go in what you just described? Like, can you actually bring those things together?
Not sure if I understood your question. So can you ask again, please?
Okay. So before, when you were in Australia, you mentioned this open floor dance practice, like ecstatic dance, 5 rhythms, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing a lot of that over the last year and a half. And I do notice stuff comes up in my body when I'm dancing, right? And it gets expressed and the energy shifts definitely. And I might not understand, like I was dancing last week and I started just crying. You know, if you'd said to me, was I sad before I started dancing, I would have said no, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and I've also felt chi, energy in that dance. And so it's been something that is quite, you're quite in your body if you are in that practice, but not, I don't always, it doesn't always quite work that way, but it can, I've experienced that. So I'm curious because what you described, standing, being with your body, being with the music, setting an intention, and then letting your body take over is actually quite similar to what would happen in that open floor practice, like, 5 rhythms or whatever, except you might have a facilitator prompting you, right? And I just wondered how you saw a connection between, or do you see a connection between those things?
Yeah. Just before I answer you, I just want to say goodbye to Wendy. Thanks for being here. It was really good to see you. I saw your message. You have to leave in a minute. So yes. So Christine, a lot of my explorations happened during dancing, like open floor dancing. And I'll be in a party and I'll be experimenting with these things because I know I can dance, like, let's say, oh, there's an open floor and let's dance. And that's like, I'm choosing to dance and I'm enjoying and I'm having fun. But then I can choose, okay, let me stop myself dancing and let just surrender to that inner awareness, inner wisdom. And then it's not about me choosing what moves I'm gonna do or what's gonna happen, or I can choose. I can choose to connect with certain intelligences at will. But what I found more useful is to let them arise spontaneously. So let's say I'm dancing, I say, oh, I want to connect with the intelligence. So I'll stop, I'll be in a grounding stance, and I'll drop myself to the first intelligence, to the base of my body. I'll bring my awareness to my pelvic floor, and I'll just invite it to, to be present. And then it's like going to TRE mode kind of thing, like in tremoring mode. And then from there, I'll just be present to see what my body wants to do. And those things that you describe can happen. I might start crying, I might start expressing some, I might start, moving in a sensual way that it's enjoyable. Anything of that can happen. So I find those spaces like excellent, because then you have the music, and the music is like prompting me and interfering with the experience all the time. So I find that the music keeps a movement going. So even though I might find a place that seems stuck without movement, it just seems, because it's never without movement. But having the music, there's something that continues moving. The sound, the waves, the rhythm, and that will help me find my own movement.
Thank you, Fernando. I feel like there's a really strong connection. So I feel really pleased that I've heard you today, because there's an open floor dance weekend next weekend. I'd already registered, so I will be thinking of you on the floor. Yeah, thank you.
And often, I find really amazing if we are dancing together and actually we allow ourselves to be in that flow and interact with each other, because we potentialize each other's experience. So, when I'm running the workshops or when I'm in the dance floor and I connect with people, and even from a distance, and I just want to feel that person. And then I have a sense of which intelligence they're moving. And I can just get there moving the same intelligence. And that usually brings more energy. And that happens a lot in sacred beauty. So I often, at some point in the dancing experience, often there is a moment that touches people's hearts. Not everybody, but some people. And then, when I see someone is standing there with, crying, but I can just feel that they are in that sacred space, and I would just stand in front of them and open, and then as soon as we look at each other, that just potentializes, and we'll be both like crying in that kind of blissful state. So there's a lot of potential for working together. And Rich and I, we see that a lot in our workshops, because when we get to the neurogenic resonance, we see that happening. It's way more amazing and powerful and enjoyable when we are doing it together, when we are enjoying the shared wisdom instead of just my own process, my own journey. It's like our journey as a group, it's really amazing.
I'll just share one last thing and then I'll stop, because other people I'm sure have questions. But I think, Fernando, I was so pleased you said that, Fernando, because I think I was a little bit not understanding how I've connected with people on the dance floor, but I went to an open floor dance retreat when I could get out of lockdown earlier this year. But I had the experience of dancing with someone who I did not know, quite strong energy. And I do Qigong, I could feel their chi, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that can happen. So I actually got quite afraid, and he sensed that I pulled back, and we stopped dancing, right? And we talked about it later in the workshop, and I was like, I was just asked, like, I could, he said, oh yeah, that happens. I'm like, chick, does that really happen? Is that really a thing? Was that like just all in my head? Well, no, apparently that's, you can feel that. So I was quite blown away by that. I think to trust, if I had trusted that, we would have danced that dance would have led somewhere else, right? I didn't really trust it at the time. Yeah.
So before we bring this to an end, is there any other question or anything to say? Yes, Lucia.
Hi. Bye, Fernando. Sorry.
Hi, Lucia.
I just wanted to ask, because my experience when I do all this work, and I don't really follow the intelligences, but I always end up at sacred beauty, right? I always end up in that deep grief. But to me, it feels like I'm going down through layers of myself rather than intelligences. I don't know. Can you speak to that a little bit more? As in, I'm kind of going through the layers of myself, kind of peeling back the onion more so than going through the intelligences. I don't know. Is that...
Yeah. It sounds like the same thing to me. Because the intelligences are yourself. You are flow of life, and everything else is what was built to deal with disruptions to that flow. But in truth, you are the flow of life. So those intelligences, when I'm playing with them, not necessarily I experience them as intelligences. I call them intelligences because I see that they have a particular way of dealing with reality, particularly way of solving problems. So there's an intelligence in that sense.
Yeah, that's
Um,
appropriate as well.
yeah.
Yeah, they're like the mechanisms that I kind of mechanisms that I deal with to meet the world. Yeah, I can see the app very clear, like, oh, I'm here now. Oh, this is where I drop into next. Oh, this is where I drop into next. And then the deep grief comes from all that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that clear, or is it?
Yeah. No, I just I didn't, like I said, I didn't relate to them as intelligences, but layers for me works really well to see it as layers. But I always end up in sacred beauty, and then there is that real peace and quiet after sacred beauty. So what was the last one you said it was? The last one was
the after sacred beauty.
After sacred beauty. Yeah.
That's pure presence.
Pure presence. Definitely feel pure presence after it. Yeah.
Yeah, at some point, I don't know if I called them like that in the book, but in the beginning, I would call them layers of reality. So yeah, I call them structuring intelligence. I can't remember what I call them. Fundamental something. Forgot. To here somewhere. Because it's just I'm trying to find words to describe them, but it's here somewhere. Never mind. Can't remember.
That's okay. Yeah. No,
fundamental qualities. I also call them fundamental qualities. Yeah. But anyway, is there any other question, or is that it for today? Rich, any last words?
Yeah, I've got a question. Have you got a particular way of finishing? Because if you don't, I have a request, or have you got something in mind for your final parting sharing?
No, I usually like to read at the back of the book, the bit I chose to be at the back of the book. I like to read the halfway through it.
Yeah, that's good. So I'm with you. I want you to read from the book, but not the back of the book. Yeah. So what I suggest we do, here's my proposal, is I'm going to invite you to read a certain part of your book. And so what I'm going to suggest is that you say your goodbyes, say your thanks, and then I'm going to suggest you drop into your intelligences. And then what you're going to do, the very final thing, and then no more speaking afterwards, we're just going to hang up after that, is I would like you to read the last paragraph of your poem, starting at I will throw myself off immense peaks.
Page, which page?
Page number, it doesn't have a page. Page number 23.
Oh, it's at the beginning.
The last paragraph of the search.
Okay.
But I'd like you to get all your goodbyes done, get all of that stuff done, and then drop into the intelligences, and then I'd like you to read us that as the final goodbye from that place.
Okay.
So we can feel that. You don't have to, but I'd like you to do that, please.
I'll do that. I don't have much to say. I just want to thank you guys, girls, for being here, and thank you, Rich, for holding the space. It was a joy. I've been postponing the launch of the English book a lot because the baby and everything. So I'm taking that out of my mind for a while. So thank you for that. So read it. So that's how to call it. That's the last bit of the poem, of a poem of mine, the beginning of the book, just before the book actually starts. So it says, I will throw myself off immense peaks into the valleys of radiant life. Luckily, my friend Death must take everything that no longer interests me, and stripped of everything I had, I now have all that is left. The winds and the rivers and the green forests, the sun and the moon, the stars and the birds of prey, truths and lies, all manners of trifles, the bodies and yawns and feelings and beats, the silence and the chilly winds, the muffled laughter and all the food, all that was created and all that exists, now make up my immense body, though no longer mine, but life's it is.